I know churches in America who built buildings and spent over $50,000 on their steeple. Welcome back. Episode 31, number 5 of our 5-part series about what a missionary actually is. Today we're going to be talking about culture. Now, in my youth, which was a long time ago, I thought a missionary looked like me, but went to preach to people who did not look like me, dress like me, or even eat like me, and thank God for that. They would be different than I am. This misunderstanding has led many missionary families to return home. In fact, over half the missionaries who make it to the foreign field don't last beyond their first term. All the years of deputation and language study were for nothing. When questioned, the primary reason for giving up and not returning to their field was the inability to adapt to the culture. Missionaries, justified or not, have universally gained the reputation that we try to change the culture of the people we go to reach. After bringing them to Christ, we often unintentionally try to turn them into American Christians, teaching them to wear suits and ties to church when their own president doesn't even dress that way. Our example influences their clothing styles, musical preferences, eating habits, and even ministry schedules. The national churches are happy to meet in a house under a tree until they learn that American churches have buildings with steeples. Take this for example. This is obviously an American style, although I believe this is probably somewhere in Europe. When you look at the spire to the steeple, it's beautiful. They need a building to meet in because of the weather. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a sin to have a church building. It's not a sin to have a steeple. But when you think about how much money was spent going from here to here, you have to wonder, could that money have not been spent other places better, more effective for the gospel? This is advertisement saying, here we are, come worship with us. This is how the house churches in the New Testament were conducted. And by the way, this is how our house churches are conducted. You see this group of people in India. It's in the middle of the afternoon when we just happen to show up. So many people are out in the field working and so forth. But here they're meeting on the ground, probably because of weather. This is someone's house here. This is where they typically have church. And look at it. There's no walls. It's just a tent made of fabric. But they've come out here. They put a carpet on the ground or a rug on the ground. They're sitting on it. They got their musical instruments. Sorry for those of you who think it's a sin to beat on a drum, but that's the only instrument they have to worship God with, unless maybe you want to look at their tambourines or something like that. And here the pastor will talk to them, or a pastor will sit on the ground beside them and teach them the Word of God. He doesn't teach them what kind of clothes they're supposed to wear. He doesn't teach them the length of their hair. Now, if you want to do that, that's fine. I'm just telling you what they do. He teaches them about a God who created the universe, who their forefathers knew and rejected, so he sent his son to redeem them. That's what he teaches them about. They can learn the trappings of Christianity later. Right now, they need to learn about Christianity. So this is the difference between established churches like we have and, can I say biblical churches? But I don't mean to imply that those are not biblical. I'm talking about in the method or the operation. You know, the first building erected for the purpose of worshiping Jesus was not built until the middle of the 3rd century. That means Jesus never preached in a church building, neither did Paul, neither did Polycarp, neither did Erasmus or any of the other leaders of the early church. This is how they preached, or out in the marketplace and so forth. So we need to keep in mind when we're talking about house churches, we're not talking about that, we're talking about this. I know churches in America who built buildings and spent over $50,000 on their steeple. How many Bibles could you send around the world for $50,000? How many national preachers could be financed for $50,000? Again, it's not a sin to have a steeple. God bless you. Makes a great lightning rod, I suppose. But if our emphasis is to get the gospel everywhere, then maybe we need to think about where and how we spend our money. So American churches have distracted us with buildings and steeples. But these people, they're not distracted by babies crying, roosters crowing, or even the occasional dog that sleeps at the pastor's feet. until we teach them that they're supposed to be distracted by those things and begin to make arrangements to prevent them. When I believed that a missionary was someone like me who went to preach to those who were not like me, I was wrong. In our failure to reach them, the problem is not that they are not like us. The problem is that we are not like them. Paul emphasized this when he said, I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. And this I do for the gospel's sake, he said, that I might be partaker thereof with you. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 22 and 23. In other words, Paul said this, I never tried to make you like me. Instead, I became like you so that I might become one of you and bring you to Christ. We as missionaries should not have to endure other cultures. We should assimilate them.
Imagine if your pastor was from an Asian tribe. He only wore his tribal clothing, a modest, miniskirt length tunic. He always ate his traditional food, grub worms and roasted dog. He only allowed his preference of musical instruments, bamboo flutes and drums, and insisted that everyone sit on the floor. How effective would his ministry be? How enticing would it be for your neighbors to join your church? When we force our cultural preferences on other societies, those who do convert are often seen as traitors to their own people, desiring to be like foreigners rather than their forefathers. This change diminishes the strength of their witness. What do you think Paul meant by becoming one of them? Consider that he had to do that everywhere he went. I wonder if he experienced culture shock. Assimilation exterminates culture shock.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode in our Understanding the Great Commission series. If you'd like a copy of the book, it's available in paperback, audiobook, and digital download. Just click the link in the description below. Thank you for watching.